Sure thing, will do. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. All right. Wonderful. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you for being here. And a big special thank you to our friends at the Dallas Public Library for putting this together. I've been looking forward to this. I hope everyone who is with us today has been looking forward to it as well. My name is Jake Poinsett. I'm the Academics Program Manager at the Trinity River Audubon Center. We are 10 miles away from downtown Dallas, but it feels a world away. That's what we like to say. And today, wow, that was a lot of rhymes in a row. And today we are going to tackle the topic of wintering sparrows. And it is something that is a thorn in many birders' sides, many people's sides, but also it's equally fascinating and fun and exciting. And it's something that I really, really love. This will not be an all-encompassing account of all the sparrow species found in our great state, but rather specifically the sparrows that winter in our great state in our slice of North Texas. So ones that are found here this time of year in our part of our state. So let's begin by going over some Zoom best practices, ways that we can make sure everyone enjoys this presentation the best of our abilities, and these bullet points are going to help us do exactly that. So if everyone can please remember to have your camera turned off and mute your microphone. Feel free to ask questions using the chat box. There will be time for Q&A at the end. If anything pops up, any questions pop up while I'm talking, feel free, throw it in, and we'll try to get to it at the very end. Also, make sure that your computer sound is on and up, where you can hear me nice and clearly. I will do my best to not talk very fast. I get pretty excited, especially with topics like this, something I'm very passionate about. And also make sure your computer's video is on, because there are going to be some phenomenal pictures on some of these slides, like this here, Exhibit A, the silhouette of a swamp sparrow by Caroline Sampson. That's a beautiful picture. Now, as I mentioned before, I do work at the Trinity River Audubon Center, and we are a part of the National Audubon Society. But what does that mean? What is Audubon? What is the National Audubon Society? What is our story? The name Audubon is synonymous with birds. And to begin, we can talk about who we were named after. The great naturalist and illustrator, John James Audubon. He was instrumental in cataloging the diversity of bird species in North America, and also spreading awareness through his phenomenal artwork and pieces of work like Birds of America. He actually passed away many years before the first Audubon Society was formed, but it was named kind of as homage to him and his work for the world of birds. And the first Audubon Society was founded in Boston, Massachusetts in 1896. Thanks to the work of naturalists Mina B. Hall and Harriet Hemingway, they wanted to find an alternative to a high fashion at the time, which were plume hats. And people were hunting birds, like this great egret in this picture here, for their feathers to put in their caps. And Mina B. Hall and Harriet Hemingway would form these gatherings, these meetings where people would talk about the importance of birds and why it's not the best idea for bird health and habitat populations for killing these birds for their hats. So thanks to that, the first Audubon Society was formed. Afterwards, many other popped up in the Northeast, including in the state of New York, where the first Christmas bird count was formed. And this time of year is actually when the Christmas bird counts happen. And the first annual one was in 1900, thanks to an early Audubon officer named Frank Chapman. And the Christmas bird count is a really important part of Audubon's science initiative. It's a great piece of citizen science where people go out and they count birds. And it started because it was the alternative from the Christmas side hunt. Instead of people going to shoot birds, let's count them. And we still do it today. So if there's anyone participating in a Christmas bird count this year, best of luck. Hope you have fun. And thank you for doing it. And also, those early naturalists, those grassroots efforts, because of what they did, was the reason why the Audubon Model Law was passed in 1901 to protect water birds from plume hunting. And that kind of continued and created more Audubon societies, which in turn created the National Association of Audubon Societies in 1905. Fast-tracked to 1940, our name was changed to the National Audubon Society that we know today. And thanks to those early naturalists, those grassroots efforts, and who we are right now, we're still a leader in conservation with our work in science, boots on the ground conservation, advocacy, and education, all to make sure that birds have a place that they need today and tomorrow. And look where we are now, a nationwide influence. It's a network of chapters and staff and volunteers, partners, all working together to spread the joy of birds and their importance to habitat health. Because birds really are like a barometer to study the health of an ecosystem. Once we know about birds and their importance to the habitat, we can really do our best to be good naturalists and good stewards to the environment. And more specifically, our Audubon network here in Texas, we're branched off of the National Audubon Society, which the network, our headquarters is in New York City. And we work out of the State and Regional Office of Audubon, Texas. And there's field staff, there's advocacy staff, development staff, and there's also our 3 Audubon centers. The Trinity River Audubon Center, where I work in Dallas, as well as our great friends at Dogwood Canyon, Cedar Hill, and Mitchell Lake in San Antonio. Now, our goal at the centers is to create that bridge, to build that connection for others to make their own connections with birds and wildlife. And other than our staff, we also have phenomenal chapters, which I invite anyone to look up your local chapter and join. It's a great organization, all people who love birds and love the outdoors. And Audubon Dallas, there's a chapter, the Fort Worth Audubon Society. And I tell you all this because what we do, again, is for the joy of birds, because where birds thrive, people prosper. And some of those birds we have here in the great state of Texas are sparrows. And I think that the best way to understand sparrows and to identify sparrows and their importance to their habitats is to break down what a sparrow is. Well, a sparrow is a passerine, which is a songbird. More than half of the birds on the planet are passerines. And being a songbird, they are also considered perching birds. So they have 3 toes in the front, 1 in the back. So passerines are perching songbirds. The passerines sparrows, the old world sparrows in the family Passeridae, are birds like the house sparrow that we know. And the house sparrow is one of the most successful birds on the planet. They are everywhere. Originating in the Middle East, now they're found in Europe, other parts of Asia, all over North America. And the reason why we have them here is a German immigrant brought them over into his place in New York because he didn't like what he saw from the pests doing damage to his trees. So he brought the house sparrow as free pest control. And now the house sparrow is everywhere. This is also one of the same people who believe that the birds that were spoken by Shakespeare were so beautiful and romantic, like the European starling, it'd be nice to bring them over too. So this individual is one of the reasons why we have both the house sparrow and the European starling here in North America. But the New World sparrows, the ones we have in the family Passerellidae, are really not that closely related to those of the Old World sparrow. They're named as such because they look similar, but they're actually closely related to the Old World buntings more so than the Old World sparrows. Of the New World sparrows here in Texas, we have 38 species that have been documented, and they're found in a variety of habitats. Many of them are grassland dependent species, so they're found in beautiful prairies or savannas, short grass prairies, mixed grass, tall grass. Some are forest dwellers, and some are habitat generalists, and they can be found everywhere, including your backyards if you live in Dallas. But something that they all have in common is that people often refer to them as LBJs. I'm sure everyone's heard that phrase before. LBJ, it means little brown job. You see a sparrow, you don't know what it is, it's just some little brown job. Because they're all fairly small. They're brown primarily in color with little variation in their face and their wings, some markings on their chest. And it's a job to identify one. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's kind of hard. So that's why people just refer to that little brown bird as a LBJ, a little brown job. But once you know those distinctive head markings that we're going to go over, it makes it a little bit easier to identify them. Some other things they have in common is their bill. They have this conical bill, but it's also like a multi-tool because they eat seeds and grains, they're granivorous, but also seasonally they eat insects, depending on the species of sparrow we're talking about. So when and where do we find these sparrows, and what sparrows are we looking at? Where do they go? Where do they come from? We have year-round residents in North Texas, like the lark sparrow and the field sparrow. And we have some that breed here in North Texas, like this beautiful picture of the grasshopper sparrow. This is a grassland bird that is rapidly declining in population because it's loss of habitat. Its habitat is dwindling. 3/4 of Texas was at some point some type of grassland, but today not as much. So their space is disappearing, but is one of the summer breeding sparrows in North Texas. But most of the sparrows we find here are here in the wintertime. Nearly half of sparrow species found in Texas are winter residents. We have the proper habitat requirements for them to survive here in the wintertime. Maybe it's because we are so diverse with our ecoregions. We're such a large space, and we just have the habitat requirements for them to survive. But sadly, those habitats they rely on, just like the Blackland Prairie, are dwindling. They're disappearing. So it's important to look for sparrows, to bird and enjoy sparrows, not just because they're beautiful and they're fun, but we get to learn what these birds need to survive, and the fact that we can be good stewards of the environment by taking care of those places that the sparrows need to survive. So, you saw a sparrow. Let's identify the sparrow you found. These are some bullet points that can be very helpful to pinpoint that LBJ. What kind of habitat was it found in? Is it a grassland? Is it a remnant of a Blackland Prairie? Is it someone's pasture that has some really nice blue stem or Indian grass? Or was it in a forest? Maybe the Great Trinity Forest where I work. Or maybe was it in your backyard at a bird feeder? Knowing what sparrows are found in certain habitats can really help narrow it down. Another way to narrow it down is the time of year. If you have a field guide, you can figure out what sparrows will be here breeding in the summer, as opposed to the abundance of sparrows found here in the winter. So if you found a sparrow that is in the middle of July, it's most likely not going to be a Leconte's sparrow, which would be exciting, but it's most likely not going to happen. And also their behavior. Some are very solitary and some are gregarious, and they're found in groups, flocks, or mixed flocks. You may have stumbled upon a salt marsh sparrow if you're down in the Houston area, and it was probably by itself. But you could also find sparrows in that area that are in large groups, maybe a chipping sparrow. So depending on their behavior, and that also includes their calls and their songs. If you can remember a few calls or songs of sparrows, because oftentimes you can hear them, but you won't see them, excellent camouflage, and they'll duck into the grass and they'll hide and they're very fleety. So if you can remember a couple songs, then you can narrow down the species you may have encountered. And of course, those field marks. So this is a good side view of a lark sparrow. And on their head, they have these different technical terms that can be very helpful if you're studying a sparrow in a field guide. I'm going to use some not as technical terms when we're going through the different species profiles. But things to remember are the nape in the back of the head. Some sparrows have different colored napes. The supercilium, or like the eyebrows that go all the way back towards the nape. The submustachial stripe. Some kind of look like my mustache, you know, they're not as big, and some go all the way towards the nape. All these different things can, once you get a good look at one with your binoculars, can help you figure out what the sparrow was. But again, this can be a challenge, it can be a job, because some sparrows won't stay still. All right, so let's go through some of the wintering sparrows in North Texas. This will not include some of the birds in the Passerellidae family, like the dark-eyed juncos, the spotted towhees of eastern towhees. Even though they're in that sparrow family, I'm not going to consider them little brown jobs like the rest of them on the list here, because they don't fit that look, that profile, but they're still in the same family, and they're still found here this time of year. So let's start off fairly easy with the Savannah sparrow. It's fairly common all throughout our state in the wintertime, specifically North Texas. You can find it in a variety of places, but it's a medium-sized sparrow compared to the others on the list, compared to other sparrows in our state. It has a small bill, and also it has a brown streaky backside with a white brown streaky belly. So it's kind of flip-flop. Its back is brown with white streaks and its belly is white with brown streaks. For me, the giveaway whenever I find one is that yellow marking right before the eye and after the bill. Right at their supercilium, it starts yellow and it just fades into the rest of its colors. And then it has a white submoustachial stripe underneath of it. There's a white stripe underneath the eyes there. And its habitat, it's a grassland bird, but it can be found in the most pristine prairie remnant with beautiful blue stem grasses, or it could be found in an agricultural field that has been left feral for many, many years. The Savannah sparrow will try and find a way. Another thing you can help identify is if you can learn that high-pitched insect-like call. It kind of tells them apart from some of the other sparrows you might encounter. Fun fact, the name Savannah sparrow, its common name, oftentimes common names are named as such because of their habitat or their features, their field marks, or how they sound, how they look. But the Savannah sparrow is not named as such because it's found in grasslands like savannas. They common name the Savannah sparrows because the naturalists who cataloged it found it in Savannah, Georgia. So, and then its lookalike, one of its many lookalikes, the Vesper sparrow. Also medium-sized, it's a little bit larger than the Savannah sparrow. It has the brown streaks on the backside, but there's more gray involved, so it has more of a gray wash to it. It has a real thin white eye ring around the eye that's real prominent that other sparrows it's not as obvious. It also has white outer tail feathers when it's in flight. The tail feathers aren't as obvious as a northern mockingbird or a blue-gray gnatcatcher, but when you do see a sparrow fly and you see those white outer tail feathers, you probably just encountered a Vesper sparrow. That submoustachial stripe is the same color as its throat, as you can see, and just goes around its cheek. It kind of just blends in. It also has a chestnut patch on the shoulder, which you can't see that well in the picture, and you might not be able to see very well through binoculars. This is a bird that often doesn't stay still. So kudos to Evan Barrientos of Audubon Rockies for getting this awesome picture. And I think this picture was taken as a good example of the great work of an Audubon program, the Conservation Ranching Program. And that's one of the properties in Colorado. Now they have Vesper sparrows. So very awesome. And then the lookalikes look alike. The Lincoln's sparrow, also medium-sized, has some of the same color profile, the rustiness and the brown, but it also has like that rusty red, auburn color. It has really wide gray eyebrows with the supercilium that goes around with gray cheek, and there's an eye stripe going from the eye towards the back. It also has a tan border, a tan stripe that's just beneath that submoustachial stripe. Its cap is pointed and it has that rusty brown color with a gray stripe going across it. So it looks similar to the Vesper sparrow, but has a little more red incorporated, a little rustiness incorporated. This one's found in more of a scrubby habitat. It could be on the edge of a prairie and a forest where it transitions from a non-woody area to a woody area. So you can actually find this bird in places like Cedar Hill State Park, where it's also a good habitat for the Vesper sparrow. You can find them right next to each other, right outside of their prairie trails. But as long as you can remember those differences in their colors and the submoustachial stripe and the eyebrows, then you can tell apart the Vesper and the Lincolns. One of my personal favorites is the swamp sparrow, and for many reasons. A little darker than the rest of the sparrows we're going to see on the list. Dark on its back, it has an overall dark appearance, has a compact body with long tail, long legs. In fact, those long legs they use like a wading bird, like a miniature egret or a miniature heron. They're found in wetland habitats like swamps, a very appropriate common name. And they will wade through the water looking for insects or seeds from the plants in their habitat. So it's like a miniature wading bird. They've adapted perfectly for that lifestyle. So they have that brown, black, and red backside on their wings. That gray kind of interrupts it going up towards the head, but also with the gray eyebrow stripe or the supercilium. And it's found in those wetland habitats. We have a lot of them here at the Trinity River Audubon Center this time of year. Doesn't matter how many times I see one, it's always exciting. It's always a lot of fun. And this is either a birder's best friend or worst enemy, depends. But Audubon put a phenomenal article together about having the song sparrow being one of your first sparrows you should be able to identify, because you can use this as your base to compare other sparrows to. It's fairly large compared to other sparrows, real bulky with a real long tail. And no matter where you live in the lower 48, you can find a song sparrow certain times a year because it is habitat generalist. It's all over the place. It has a really wide range, but its colors vary, its hues vary depending on your location. So this brown here is something we would find in this area. It has that brown stripe extending from the eye all the way back to the nape, that eye line stripe. That white chest with the streaking, the streaking was kind of broken up. And then there's that spot in the middle of its chest, that brown spot in the middle of its white chest. Also, very amply and appropriately named, the song sparrow. It has a beautiful melodic tune, and you can hear it singing, and that's an easy one to remember to try to identify with other birds. And it will frequent your bird feeder as long as you have the proper seed and food out for it. Nice little plants around for it to hide and look for potential danger. So the song sparrow, very, very pretty. And then one of its lookalikes, the fox sparrow. Also large, with a round body, long tail. But if you look at the bill, it's yellow with black, as opposed to the song sparrow's bill, which is brown or black. So the yellow in there can be a giveaway that this is a fox sparrow, not a song sparrow. Also, there's less color patterns on its face. It still has that gray eyebrow, but its cheeks are all red. There isn't like much of a color pattern going from brown, gray, white. It's just gray and red. It also varies depending on your location, but this is what it would look like when we find one here. Streaking on the belly looks a little less choppy and coarse, and that spot is a little further up. And it's more of a forested setting sparrow. You'll find it in forests and urban settings. It can be found in your backyard bird feeders as well. And like some of the other sparrows that are found in forest settings, they're fun to watch on the forest floor because they'll scrape all the leaves and hop around and start jumping backwards until they find the right seed they're looking for. It's fun to watch them, how they act. This is a lot of my friends and fellow birders' favorite sparrow in the area. We're super lucky to have this one here this time of year. It's the Harris's sparrow, named after one of John James Audubon's good ornithologist friends. It's a very large sparrow, one of the largest ones on the list with a very long tail. It has that obvious black cap and throat with a pink bill. That pink bill contrasted with the black on its face is a quick giveaway. They tend to feed on the ground in the openings of forests and open woodlands and the edges of forests. We find them on our trails here all the time in the wintertime, just picking up the seeds. They're actually the only endemic songbird that breeds in Canada. And then they make their way all the way down to the southern Great Plains. So very specific. They breed in the northern forested tundra of Canada, and they come all the way down to the southern Great Plains for the winter. And it's not a prairie bird in the Great Plains, but more along those forests, along the rivers, like the Trinity River. It could be in a city park with nice big trees. And then a very common one this time of year, the white-throated sparrow. Also large, chunky body, long tail. It has that distinctive white throat with the yellow patch before the eyebrow. On both sides, you got those thick white stripes, real thick eyebrows that go all the way back towards the nape. And it's not too hard to spot, but you will definitely hear it before you see it. It is known for its mnemonics. So a mnemonics is like a way to remember a tune or a pattern. So for birding, the mnemonics is something we make a fun phrase to remember a bird call. So for Carolina wren, it's tea kettle, tea. And the barred owl is who cooks for you all. And the white-throated sparrow is Old Sam Peabody, Peabody. I'm sure everyone has heard that lately, no matter where you are. And Old Sam throws a bunch of Peabodys in there too. It's not just two at the end. It could be Old Sam Peabody, 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 Peabody. So once you recognize that tune, you'll realize that the white-throated sparrow is all over the place. It will forage on the ground of forest floors and low-hanging branches, hopping from branch to branch. It may come out and peer to investigate and see who the birder is, trying to look at it through binoculars. And it's another one that will frequent your backyard bird feeder. And one of its close doppelgangers is the white-crowned sparrow. This bird has been studied by ornithologists, I mean, a lot compared to other birds. It's like, I've read an article, it's like the lab rat of ornithology. Like they just studied this bird a lot. And it is a very large sparrow with a long tail. When it has the black and white stripes on its cap with just a solid throat and cheeks. So not as much color variation on the rest of its head, but just its cap. The adults, so don't be confused, because the adults have the white and black stripes in the crown, while the juveniles have brown and gray stripes in the crown. So we can find both here this time of year, but just look for that pattern on the top of the head and a real solid color on the throat and the cheeks. And it's another sparrow found in forested areas. And it can be confused with the American tree sparrow, but as you can see, American tree sparrow, smaller, has a real long, thin tail, and has the rusty red, a solid cap of rusty red, which eventually goes to the gray supercilium, red eye line all the way back towards the nape, and that black and yellow bill. The top part of the bill is all black, bottom's all yellow, and it has that spot on its chest, kind of like the song sparrow and the fox sparrow, but real solid pattern otherwise. Solid color on its chest. It will rarely visit your backyard bird feeder, just like some of the other birds we've mentioned, but its name is kind of misleading. It is found in forested habitats, but they named it after what they thought was a close relative, but like we said before, we realized not so much. They named it after the Eurasian tree sparrow, which nests in trees, but the American tree sparrow is a ground nester. So it can be found in trees though, as you can see in this picture, but it doesn't nest in trees like its European counterpart. And one of its lookalikes is the chipping sparrow. Very, very, very common this time of year, real widespread. It's another slender sparrow. When we see it in the wintertime, its cap is a rusty brown as opposed to a bright red. And its beak is tan in the winter, while the breeding birds have a black beak, but that black eye stripe towards the nape will always stay the same color, and its underside is completely clear with no barring or no spots, as opposed to the American tree sparrow, which would have that spot in the center. So it does look similar, but look for that brown and dark brown as opposed to red, and no spot on its belly. This one is real gregarious, usually found in flocks of chipping sparrows, and they'll join mixed flocks of other sparrows looking for food. And this one's my favorite, the LeConte sparrow. It's not something you're gonna see every day, but it is one of the smallest sparrows in North America, and it does winter in some nice prairie remnants and restored prairies of North Texas. It's notorious for being secretive, and it will spend most of its time on the ground. So it is much more comfortable fleeing on foot to get away from predators as it is to flying to get to another area of bunch grass. It's so secretive that after the French naturalist LeConte first discovered it, they didn't find a nest until 100 years later. So it's a very, very secretive bird found in large, beautiful prairie lands. When you do see it, it's an obvious find because of that awesome orange throat and towards the top of the chest with the orange supercilium, gray cheeks, black barring. It's really striking. It's like with the sun hitting it, it's even more beautiful. But it is uncommon. I know recently they saw some at Hagerman National Wildlife Refuge, this perfect habitat for them, as well as the LBJ grasslands. You can find them there. But this time of year, you'll probably most likely find them where there's good amounts of blue stem. So this, in the wintertime, majority of their diet is seeds from big blue stem, little blue stem, bushy blue stem. And one of its lookalikes is also secretive and hard to find, the Henslow's sparrow. Also small, also habitat specialist, found in prairies. It's a little bit larger than LeConte's. It has a chunky bill with a real flat head, flat cap, and there's olive green rather than the orange on the sides of the face. And it doesn't have much coloration on its throat, just white with barring. It has the real deep auburn on its wings with black streaks. Also, like I mentioned before, it's a prairie bird. And if you're looking for one through call, it'll be nearly impossible in the wintertime because they're virtually silent. So if you stumble upon one, it's because it's been flushed, or it might be early in the morning where it's sitting on top of the grass, kind of applicating. So I went over some of these sparrows you can find here, some of their field marks, some fun facts, but where can you find them in the field? And how can you introduce them to your own backyards? Setting up a bird feeder, it's a great way to do it. A flat or tray feeder can provide food for those ground foragers we mentioned before. A lot of those sparrows will be picking seeds off the ground in groups or flocks or solo. So you can rely on the work of the Carolina chickadee and the tufted titmice and all the other birds that are knocking food out of the bird feeder onto the ground. Those sparrows will come and be the cleanup crew. But this can also invite squirrels. Not sure how you feel about having squirrels at your bird feeder. Some people don't like it, some people don't mind. So alternatives to feeders and hopper feeders might not be as inviting to a squirrel, might be a little more difficult. And you can still get sparrows there, like this chipping sparrow on this feeder here. Some seeds to introduce to entice them to come to your yard: Niger, black oil sunflower, Holt sunflower, milo, and millet. Again, this time of year, they're primarily granivorous, so a variety of seeds will introduce or entice them to come to your yard and feed. And if you go to Project Feeder Watch, they have a more detailed account of things you can provide for real specific species too. And I always think it's a great idea to just overall create a sparrow-friendly yard. All living things need food, water, shelter, and space to survive. And if you have an area at your home or your apartment complex or where you live, try to do exactly that. Have some native grasses and forbs that bloom certain times a year. And the things that they rely on in their native habitats, like the big blue stem, the little blue stem, inland sea oats, a variety of forbs like wildflowers. There's some great places online you can look up and see what grows in your area, like Lady Bird Johnson is a phenomenal website. I use it every day. I love it. And they can really, really help you out. And obviously, Audubon has that Plants for Birds site. That's so great. I recommend checking that out too. And incorporate a bird bath, even in the wintertime. You know, they still need water to have access to. You can maybe put something in there so they can go down towards where it's frozen and come out, and incorporate a brush pile so they have hiding places, especially for birds like towhees. They're often on the ground and they're hiding in brush piles. So if you have a visitor like a Cooper's hawk or a sharp-shinned hawk who is waiting for those birds at the bird feeder, give them an escape route, a place to hide and hang out. So now we've went over some sparrows you can find, how you can introduce them in your backyard. What about going out in the field and looking for them? There's so many places to go in North Texas and go birding. A lot of great opportunities, a lot of great outdoor spaces, and for specifically sparrows, there is an abundance. And this is just some. Cedar Hill State Park and our friends at Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center, great place to go look for sparrows. Cedar Hill State Park has a variety of habitats, including their beautiful restored prairie area, a lot of great species there. Louisville Lake Environmental Learning Area, northwest of Dallas. Every bird I've mentioned there on the presentation has been listed on eBird. So it's a very great place to find all those sparrows and then some. Hagerman National Wildlife Refuge, over 300 species have been documented there. It's beautiful. It's about a 2-hour drive from the city, perhaps north by Oklahoma. And there's Fort Worth Nature Center, the National Grasslands, and of course, the Trinity River Audubon Center. I invite you to come out and go birding with us. Every third Saturday, we lead a bird walk in the morning. You can sign up online, register ahead of time. This morning, we saw some fox sparrows and swamp sparrows, Lincoln and Vesper, and of course, the white-crowned. So there's a lot of great places to go birding for sparrows, and there's a lot of different things you can see in North Texas. And please spare some time for the sparrows. Become a citizen scientist. eBird is a phenomenal tool to look up your local hotspots or a hotspot to go birding if you're on vacation. But also, it's a great piece of science that ornithologists use as a really valuable tool. Upload your data so ornithologists can understand the health of bird populations in certain areas. Because a lot of these birds we mentioned are dwindling. They're losing habitat, they're losing space. So you contributing to eBird is a really important part of citizen science. And also Project Feeder Watch. When you have those bird feeders in your backyard, you can upload your data onto the website. Let ornithologists know what birds are hanging out in the city of Dallas in your backyard. Or if you live on the outskirts, wherever you live, you can upload the data of what you're finding at your bird feeder. And of course, this time of year is the Christmas bird count. Unfortunately, this year, we're not able to host more people due to the COVID-19 rules and regulations. But if you're interested in participating in a Christmas bird count, we do have a track circle. Hopefully next year, if you're interested in joining, please join us. We can look for sparrows and other birds. The Great Backyard Bird Count is another great all-inclusive birding opportunity. And Texas Parks and Wildlife is a really cool survey called Project Prairie Birds. Find your local state park, see if they're interested in having new volunteers to help survey prairie birds. At Sheldon Lake State Park, where I used to work in the Dallas area, we had a really important prairie restoration where we would count the prairie birds, make sure that the restoration that was happening was actually working. And they do that all around the state. Look up, reach out to a local biologist, see how you can help, see how maybe you could do surveys on your own property. And of course, volunteer. We're always looking for new volunteers at the Trinity River Audubon Center that help with prairie restoration or help with birding, help with education, help just talking to the public. If you love birds and you love talking about it like we do, then volunteer and help out. So I appreciate everyone joining us today. And I had a lot of fun talking talking about some of the birds I love. And I'd be more than happy to field some questions if we have any in the chat. Let me stop sharing my screen here. All right, in what ways do sparrows reveal the health of our ecosystem? So if a sparrow like the grasshopper sparrow is a grassland dependent species and it is real specific in what habitat it can occupy and its populations are down, then we can understand that that specific habitat, it's not around. They don't have their habitat requirements anymore to survive. And we can do our part by restoring or providing those spaces. And also they eat seeds and grains and also insects. So they act as a form of pest control and they keep populations in check of other organisms, and also they're food for other animals too. So if you remove those birds from the equation, then things either boom or bust or fall apart. Are there any differences between males and females? For a lot of songbirds, a lot of passerines, there are. So the sexual dimorphism, you can see that there's differences in colors and size, and the birds that we mentioned, they're pretty uniform. Wintertime, but some breeding plumages, they do look very, very different. Yeah. Awesome. And thank you. I'm glad you learned a lot, and definitely go buy some bird seed and set up a feeder and put it up on Project Feeder Watch. Let everyone know what kind of birds you found in your backyard. Mixed confused sparrows and wrens. Yeah, totally. Especially this time of year, because we have the Carolina wren, which is a year-round resident. And now we can also include the sedge wren and the marsh wren. And with wrens, they're chunky and short. They often have that tail that goes upright into the air. So when you find it in one spot, that tail goes pretty upright into the air. When sparrows, they're not as chunky. They don't have that tail that goes upright, but they're often found in the same habitats. So if you look for the tail, and the chunkiness of the wren is a good way to tell them apart. Where to hear bird calls? Early in the morning and just about everywhere. You know, birds, depends on the species you're after, but they are extremely adaptive and they can be found all over the place. So if you wake up nice and early, maybe go sit by a local park or come to the Audubon Center when we open up, and you'll just hear a symphony of birds. The stat at the beginning about the number of wintering sparrows. More than half of the sparrow species in our state are found here in the wintertime. Thank you. Where do the winter birds summer? So that's a good question. My favorite bird, the Leconte sparrow, can be found in southern Canada and the Dakotas and Minnesota. So it depends on the species, if they're a long distance migrant, short distance, medium distance, or if they're a year-round resident. Really rare sparrow found in East Texas, the Bachman sparrow, that's year-round, but it's only found in that pine forest habitat with palmettos and wiregrass, sawgrass. Why is it my favorite? I think it's beautiful. So it's just purely for personal reasons. You know, it makes my heart melt. It's just a beautiful bird, the LeConte sparrow. And it was a lot of fun finding them for the first time. So it's one of those things, it's a memory that just doesn't go away. So whenever I see the LeContes again, I just remember how much fun it was when I first found this bird. I've only read about it, I've only learned about it, and then I see it in the wild. It's just very exciting. I haven't seen an effect of the pandemic and the amount of birds coming down here, but I did see that there's a lot more wildlife out and about at the center. Maybe because the lack of people have been around, they feel more comfortable coming out. And any suggestions for learning bird calls? I bought a CD, Peterson Field Guide for Bird Songs, and whenever I'm doing dishes or cooking, I just put it on. And it's been really helpful for me to recognize a few. And it was pretty cheap, bought it on Amazon. And there's apps like the Audubon Field Guide Bird app, where you can use those to click on a bird and click its call and try to remember that way. Merlin Bird ID app also uses calls too. And I'm sure there's other apps where you can, I forget some names. My good friend, Ted Zobek, showed it to me. But there's an app where you can download and it listens to the call and tells you what the bird is. So there's an app for everything, it seems like. It's pretty cool. A website where you can hear bird call examples. Allaboutbirds.org is really great, as well as the Audubon website. They'll have calls of birds for different times of year, different location, different types of calls. Sparrow from a finch generally. So finches, their beaks are even more chunkier. So I remember sparrows, we mentioned, it's kind of a multi-tool. They're used for cracking seeds, but also tweezing insects. And finches have a real conical and chunky beak. So real quick giveaway is that. And also their size. Well, depends on the finch and sparrow. Oh, online site to hear birds. Yeah, allaboutbirds.org, the Audubon website. And those apps like Merlin Bird ID is really good. Good resources to try to identify a bird that you see on a walk. I love print field guides. National Audubon Society has a great collection of field guides. I have one for birds, reptiles, amphibians, trees. Peterson field guides are phenomenal. Sibley's are really, really great too. So it's really your personal preference. But that has been extremely helpful for me over the years, learning different birds and their field marks and their habitats, and really, really helpful tools to learning what they look like and where they are. And those websites we mentioned before are good places to learn them too. Cornell course about bird songs, you're right. I would love to do another class about the most popular wintering birds in Texas, for sure. In January, we're going to be doing a presentation about ducks, but it'll be more geared towards a kids program. So if you still want to join in, it'll be a lot of fun. We're going to make our own little duck craft, and we'll talk about ducks found in the wintertime. If you live in an area where there are a few birds, that mean you live in an area that has toxic chemicals. To what extent can birds inform us about the health of human habitats? So that's a great question. It all depends. So if they are kind of like the canary in the coal mine. So they are sensitive to pollution, especially air pollution for sure. But just because there are birds in your area doesn't mean that you live in a toxic area. Maybe they just don't have the things that they need to survive. We mentioned before, those habitat requirements. Maybe the carrying capacity for birds in your local county park isn't wide enough or large enough, or doesn't have the right food sources, or it's outcompeted by other animals that are there. So it doesn't always mean that you live in a toxic environment. The BirdNet app, that's the one. Cool. Thank you, Marcus. Well, awesome. I hope everybody had a great time. I did too. Song Sleuth. I'm going to put my email in the chat. Thank you. And if anybody wants to ask more questions about birds or about Audubon, please feel free to shoot me an email. We'd love to have you out to the center.
Okay. Well, it looks like all the questions have been asked that I think people have. So thank you so much, Jake, for joining us today. This was very informative. And hopefully we can do something like this again. I will put some of the things that we've discussed, like the websites and apps and things for bird calling in the notes afterwards I send out, as along with the link. And if you guys want more programs like this, we'd love to hear from you. If you email us at libraryprograms@dallascityhall.com, we'd love to hear from you all. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Jessica. That was a lot of fun. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.